Okay. All right, hang on. We're just going to wait for this to make sure that we're up and running. Yes, we are live. Hi, everyone. It's me, Rachel, and Huma today, and we have with us two amazing guests, Dian and Pearlyn, here to share with you about working with multidisciplinary teams. And so we have 30 minutes. So we're going to keep it very brief, and we're going to hand over the introductions to Pearlyn to start off with. Hi,
Thank
everyone.
you.
With multidisciplinary teams. Okay. Ooh. Okay. Sorry, go on.
Right. Can I share the screen now?
Yeah.
Does it work? Okay,
Hang on.
great.
Okay.
Okay, so Rachel, you can let me know. Are we ready?
Yep, it's up. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today in this very humble live talk. So, as Rachel has shared, this is going to be the topic for today, navigating the ups and downs of multidisciplinary collaborations. Now, some of you may already be in such collaborations, while some of you might be considering going into such collaborations. So, over here, I think Dian and I, we really hope to share our experiences um, of being in multidisciplinary sort of like collaborations, and hopefully we can also provide some insights into the processes that enable such teams to work together, and also what we as art therapists we can contribute to these teams while still holding on to our identity. So there is a lot of value obviously in coming into a multidisciplinary team, but speaking from personal experience, I think these collaborations can sometimes bring up a lot of insecurities. So, for example, some of the things that I thought about was, how can I not let my identity get diluted, or how can I continue to advocate for art therapy while still working with these very diverse professionals? So, we may not answer all of these questions in a very, very short presentation that we have, but hopefully we can plant the seeds, for further thoughts and discussions in this matter. Okay, so this is just the agenda that we're gonna work with today. So we're gonna talk about what's happening in KK Hospital, where I am right now, and then Dian will share about SGH, and then we'll also seek to answer these questions: what works, what can we do, and what's the future like. Um, yeah, so we'll start with KK. Okay, so just a little background. Art therapy at KK Hospital has always been part of CHAMS since 2014, and CHAMS refers to, as you can see over here, Child Life Art and Music Therapy programs. Now, just talking about this particular team actually is in itself another multidisciplinary discussion on its own, but just very briefly, how we've organized ourselves over at KK is that our referrals. So the referrals come to CHAMS, and the individual disciplines would work with the patients based on the needs of the patient. So for us, art therapy focuses on referrals that are related to mental well-being and also related to social concerns. And also because we are also a team, essentially, so we have also engaged in several joint projects together. Now, what I would really love to share today actually is CAPES. So CAPES refers to arts, creative arts for people in extraordinary situations. Yeah, so you can read from the screen, a little bit more details about that. But basically, it's an inpatient group art and music therapy program for children and young persons admitted for social concerns. So I won't be going into specifics of CAPES itself, but what I would like to do is to illustrate how we have organized ourselves to develop this working partnership, and how this has kind of since evolved, and the way we've worked out is actually allowed us to evolve this program to work with many other different populations. So hopefully that's something that we can talk about today. So obviously this is a collaboration with the music therapist. So I think the interesting thing about this is that we are both creative arts therapists, which I feel then kind of sometimes can potentially blur the line between, but we are both creative arts. What is the value add that the two of us can do? So, when we were working collaboratively in designing this particular program, what we did was that we pulled out tools and techniques from our respective disciplines, which we were then able to seamlessly go hand in hand to achieve these therapeutic goals, which is insight building and also psychoeducation for the children that we were working with. So for the music therapist, she would use drum circles to facilitate attunement, and also music improvisation and therapeutic songwriting to concretize and to consolidate learnings from the session. So that would be where our psychoeducation portion came in. Now, for art therapy, I would engage the kids in round robin, which is to kind of add some unpredictability and hopefully make it fun for the kids. And also I'll encourage arts-based response, obviously, because that's what we do as art therapists. Now, over here, you can see that there's some overlapping over here. So these were actually the portions that we found that we were both able to help us to co-facilitate. And it was something that both of us were able to bring to the table. So call and response, mindfulness based, mindful self compassion. I tripped on my word, and also music and imagery. And what my music therapist does is that she does a little bit of GIM, which is guided imagery with music. Yeah. So I think in trying to smoothen this collaboration, we were actually quite clear of what our assigned roles would be when we came into CAPES. So I feel that it's very important to clarify what um, over here, that we do not claim that our modalities are limited to what you see in the Venn diagram. But we did find that when we clearly define our roles, we actually were able to provide a structure to this working partnership. And these roles that we kind of built for ourselves was a reflection of the therapist's strength and also the perceived strength of each modality. So again, it's not hard and fast rules of like only music therapists can do this, only art therapists can do this, but it was just something that we kind of figured out among ourselves and made sure that we were able to stick with it. However, it is after all still fluid, and the needs of the group would kind of inform us whether we need to kind of shift that role a little bit. So from the patient's perspective, I think working collaboratively really helped patients achieve cathartic release while also prompting a sense of connectedness. And the availability of two modalities gave flexibility to each therapist to shift the environment depending on the needs of the patient. So, for example, say if an arts based response became too confronting in the session, this portion of the session could be changed into a therapeutic songwriting, which can potentially ease the tension and also to help the patients gain a bit more sense of safety before we can even move on. So this process of actually traversing among the modalities really helped to minimize the stress and also potential psychological harm. But of course, I mean, when we are trying to embark on such a endeavor in such a big organization, there were some challenges that we had to grapple with. So the first thing, of course, is sustainability. Um, Pooling the resources of two therapists together while ensuring that other patients in our workload were being covered. Ethical considerations in ensuring that the different agencies are aligned into their understanding of the need for safety and confidentiality in both art and music therapy. Limited resources, definitely. I mean, the literature in the creative arts therapies is actually limited generally. And when we were trying to do some research on using art and music therapy in a transdisciplinary model, that was even more scarce. So that kind of made it feel like we were really trying to invent the wheel over here. And of course, like I said, we are both creative arts therapy, so we were dealing with a lot of overlaps as well, and navigating the similarities, and how do we resolve, or how do we complement each other rather than be feel threatened perhaps by the other person's contribution. And of course, at the end of the day, speaking each other's language was very important. It's just for the sake of fluidity and consistency throughout the session. So the biggest takeaway that we got from Kate's and some of the other projects that we work together really is that the synergy between therapists is really important, and that comes with a lot of open communication and common understanding between the partners. Confidence The therapist's confidence in their respective roles was really crucial as well because we needed to know very clearly what each profession could bring to the table. And of course, open mindedness. I mean, for both therapists to understand how other forms of therapies can overlap and complement, like what we've talked about just now. And honestly, when these points started to get muddy, we found that we just had to again pull the focus back into the patient's needs, and that really helps us to clear a lot of issues up. So when professionals understand that the work that we do is really not about you or me, but when we consider the patient's needs at the forefront of their approaches, it actually becomes easier and more intuitive to work together. So that's my sharing of Kate and my experience. So from now, I would like to hand over to Dian, who will tell us a bit more about what's going on at SGH.
Okay, Dian, when you're ready, yep. Okay. Okay.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much, Pearlyn and everyone. It's a very interesting things to hear about your work with CAPE. So from my end, the SGH experience, I think some of you may have heard this before. Um, Sorry, the screen is changing. Is okay. Done? Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
it's,
So
your slides are up.
okay, so from the SG head side, for some of you who has heard this before, bear with me for a second. Art therapy at SGH itself was established in 2010 under the SGH Eating Disorder Clinic. The clinic itself was established in 2003, I think, right after SARS was settled. And you can read more about our experience in treating eating disorder. And I believe ATAS has still have some copies of the book. So if you wish to have the hard copy, contact Rachel. Otherwise, you
Yeah.
can also download it online. And um, I work in the multidisciplinary team that involves the psychiatrist, pediatrician, nurse clinician, SGH allied health team, and also support staff. And medical complications are very common in individuals with eating disorder, and it is also associated with one of the highest mortality rates among psychiatric conditions. And it is with this unit I learned the importance of the biopsychosocial model of treatment. So the biopsychosocial model is an interdisciplinary model that will look at the interconnection between biology, patient physiology, and biological health, psychological factors, and also social environmental factors. And the model specifically look into how these aspects play a role in topic that range from health or disease as well as human development, and this include the psychiatric conditions too. And this model is really important in treating individuals with eating disorder because it really takes a village to treat and care for eating disorder patients. And these are all the treatment offered by our service. Art therapy is also offered as an inpatient and outpatient consultation treatment. Before the COVID, I used to conduct these sets, support for eating disorder and eating disorder EDMS. So, so in the past, I was involved in running the lunch meal supervision program, and I even facilitate support group for patients in alternate with the other clinicians. In art therapy was also offered as an inpatient group. We are we are planning to resume it again. Case example. I'm just so glad to find this image because for me, working in multidisciplinary team is like each team member bring their own pieces of a puzzle that contributes towards patient holistic care. For example, we run weekly multidisciplinary team meeting, and it's a great meeting. Um, I kind of missed the meeting. It was temporarily stopped due to COVID, but we begin to resume it again, and it's great because this is a meeting where I'm able to hear perspective from each clinicians that are involved in the patient care, and it really helps to build a holistic picture of the patient case. So the cases that I'm going to discuss will be an amalgamation of different cases to illustrate what I'm trying to say. Okay. Um, let's take a concept of transference and countertransference. It's also interesting for me to observe and hear how patients may behave very differently towards an authoritative figure like a doctor versus non-authoritative figures such as art therapists or occupational therapists. And as I mentioned earlier, this really enriches my treatment formulation, and it's also helped me to mentalize because I began to be able to see how these differences are replayed in the patient's family dynamic, for example, or even vice versa when art therapy session can help the team to inform the other side of patients that have not been discovered by the team. So I remember that I was in the meeting, and then the team shared a struggle with a particular patient. I think patient has a lot of hostile projection towards them. But upon sharing patient artwork and also narrative, the team began to really see the real reason also behind the hostility. Um, so basically, this case, this patient was really scared of losing everything they had worked hard for, and therefore it's understandable that that the hostility is actually a protective defense mechanism against this fear. So understanding this background and empathizing with this background, we really began to look for more creative way to engage with these patients. And so in this case, it's really rewarding to see how art therapy can be used to enhance therapeutic alliance between patient and clinician, and not just between me and the patient, but his whole group. So to sum up between the two of us, I guess there are around 6 lessons learned from both of our cases. And for us, these are good communication is really, really important. And again, on both cases, it's really important to have a clearly defined roles as well. Otherwise, we'll get into trouble. Of course, overlapping can happen. But again, this is where the communication is really important. So sometimes um, um, my sometimes our work, my art therapy work with the psychology work converge, and so we're like, okay, let's talk about this and let's formulate a different kind of treatment so we can work more effectively, for example. And that leads to openness. So we open to learn about different modalities and discipline and where they come from, and also appreciate strength and weaknesses of each modalities. And then this brings to a sense of empathy. And empathy is really important ingredients. We also learn to be in another shoes. So from the art therapist side to the medical team, it's not easy to be the bearer of negative projection from patient, for example, when you are in the doctor authoritative shoes, right? And also vice versa, from the medical team to the art therapist. And of course, there are some sticky points. And when this is the case, the mentalization is very important, because then we begin to have open communication again, where we can try to learn to understand what's on the team's mind. And this include their training background and their philosophy of care as well. I think in as another ingredient of empathy is also to have a systematic understanding of the care system that we are in, including a broader aspect of transference and countertransference of a patient. So, for example, doctor as an authority figure, right? Maybe we can also expand systemically and think about, how does this replay in the patient dynamic, for example? So is it similar to this patient relationship with their school or with the parents? So so yeah, so that's empathy. And then eventually we grow to build trust, compassion and care towards one another. So it's like a big family. And also finally, to keep our focus and mutual goals aligned. And basically it's really is about patient needs and not the therapist or modalities or intermodality needs. And so this brings us to pitfalls. Um, yeah, disagreement happens. It's in any family disagreement happens too, right? And this is where we need to step back and ask ourselves what's going on here. Sometimes I ask myself, is there any transference and counter-transference issue at play? Or are we replaying something in this dynamic? Yeah. Is it about systemic differences in our training? For example, the clashes of trauma-informed training versus the medical model training, for example. And so understanding this and being able to step back is important so that we can continue to teach and also learn about each other's strengths and weaknesses. Um, and also watch out for your own sign of burnout and how it impacts you, and also the cases that you see, because it can also impact the interaction you have with the team. Like Pearlyn mentioned earlier, watch out for a blurred role. Definitely to continue use supervision and personal therapy to really work around these issues as well, and continue to maintain open communication, willingness to learn from each other and trusting each other. And most importantly, always ask yourself, whose needs are we serving? Is it really is about patient needs or is not? Yeah. So it's important to just step back to avoid this kind of pitfalls. So in conclusion, um, strength of working in multidisciplinary team really lies in the power of collaboration. That's what we believe. I think it's collaboration and community of care. It can be powerful therapeutic tools too for patients. When it is done right, it can really enrich patients' care, preventing vicarious trauma by shared responsibility. So sometimes I leapfrog appointment with psychologists as well, and work together through peer supervision and share case formulation. But it also requires hard work to ensure that collaboration can be sustained positively. Rupture happens, so expect that to happen, but ensure that it is addressed by both party. And sometimes you just have to take on a high road and don't take it too personally. And I would like to close this talk by teamwork begins by building trust. And the only way to do that is to overcome our need for invulnerability. So thank you for listening. And now I'm gonna hand it back over to you guys. Has anyone experienced being in a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary experience before, and what were your reflection from perspective of art therapists? And also talking about multidisciplinary approach, has any of you thoughts about having us an association to adopt the NHS approach, like this, like adopting the CHAMPS model, for example, or the NHS model, for example. So yeah, so I'm going to stop sharing now, and over
Okay.
to Rachel.
Okay, so those were a couple of questions. So I think we'll address the question that did come up earlier when Pearlyn was talking, and it was asking about not being clear about your work with the music therapist. And do you refer to it as intermodal or multidisciplinary?
Okay, so in my presentation, I was a bit mindful not to mention. Okay, I think I'm mindful because multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, they all mean different things, and I have to be very careful in using those terms. In a stricter sense, actually, I would say that my collaboration with the music therapist is a transdisciplinary. CAPES itself is trans because we all take equal role in working with this particular group, and it is a situation in which if one of us decides that let's switch roles, we can actually still do that as well. So that's why we are kind of transdisciplinary, if we were to really define it that way. Yeah.
All right, great.
Can I just jump in there, because my question
Sure.
is also somewhat related to this. So, because I have experienced working with a drama therapist for a little bit, and what I felt was that, because although we tried to structure the sessions, like before each session, we had some kind of a structure that she would take over, and then I would do something, an activity, etc. But sometimes there was, you do have to go with the flow, and with the needs of the clients. And there were times when the client was more inclined to spend more time doing the artwork rather than maybe doing the drama-based activity.
Yeah.
And so do you feel that sometimes in the sessions that, I don't want to call it an imbalance, but you know what I mean, that there's a tendency to do more of, let's say, use more of the art therapy rather than the music. And when that happens, how do you adjust to that?
Sure. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that sometimes there might be some little tension that emerges between the therapist, because the client's needs seems to be, seems to have shifted. It doesn't really go with the flow. And like what I've mentioned in the earlier slide, I mean, these roles that we put for each other, they are fluid and they are open for changes. I think in terms of my own experience of working with the music therapist is that so we have the good fortune of sitting together. We have a lot of conversations. And I think what I want to emphasize is that before we actually started CAPES, a lot of conversations went on. We really had to be very clear, or we really had a lot of opportunities to talk about what exactly, like what's unique about our own disciplines, and what do we believe in, what are our common principles and goals. And I think that really helped us to build that synergy that's needed to conduct a session. To be honest, I feel very fortunate in the sense that we haven't really had that dynamic going on yet, like in terms of, if we sense that the patient works much better with music, then we will push, like I would push a little bit of the art therapy. But if the patients really cannot do that, then that's where she will come in to kind of take over. So I think we've come to a point where in this partnership where we do have that implicit sort of understanding that this needs to happen. And so again, coming back to the needs of the patients, what does the patient need? Patient needs art, we'll give them more art. Patient needs music, then music therapist comes in. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've got one more question here. Since there is known hierarchy in institutions and hospitals, how do art therapists then advocate about art therapy and our insightful works in such places?
Dian, do you want to take this?
With a lot of patience and a lot of hard work.
No, I think we need a bit of elaboration there, because
I was stretch thinking, it out a tiny bit.
Because even I was thinking, because coming from, it appears, you're quite psychodynamic. I think most of our training is very psychodynamic in nature. And then you're faced with all these, the psychiatrists and the other professionals who are more hard science kind of, based, rooted in those hard sciences. So how do they take to your talk about transference and countertransference and all? Have you faced a lot of hurdles? Have you ever felt that you've had to prove something to them, or you've had to kind of, again, advocate? And
well, it takes a while for people to adapt to your to new modalities and to understand your way of working. So from my end, I think it takes two way as well. So yes, there are this kind of course they want to know, and they kind of like curious. But from my end, it's like I also try to learn about where they come from as well. So I think that's important. Because ultimately, it's about. So hold on, I've lost my trail of thought. What are we talking about?
What
You've
do-
been,
Can I step in here?
No, no,
Are
no,
you
sorry.
okay?
I've just wrote. Yeah, I lost my trail of thoughts.
that's
it
okay.
is late. It is late, and that happens. Okay.
Sorry, it's too
I
late.
think, but if you don't mind me jumping in
No,
this
go
in
ahead,
this
go ahead,
point,
go
I
ahead.
think. Oh, sorry, thanks. So I think what you said is correct. Sometimes we also need to learn their language as well, and I
That's what
find
I'm
what's
trying
really
to say.
helpful. And I find what's really helpful is I sometimes structure the way I think through I structure my thought processes in a way that is less that is a little bit more in medical terms. And so I think one of the biggest thing that I had to adjust to when I started working in a hospital is to learn how to do things like goal setting and writing down, very specific, what my goals are, what my processes are, and stuff like that. But then again, I come from a slightly different model. Like my training is very humanistic, very person centered. So I guess in that sense, it was I kind of took on that language to work with them. The other thing that I find really helpful is actually finding an advocate. There were among this whole team of people who are like medical people, hard sciences and all, there will always be people who are advocates. And so when you are able to catch onto one of these advocates, I think that really helps to I mean then
Push it
it
forward.
usually starts with projects together and stuff like that. So yeah. I think the end that's how a lot of the projects do happen, right? We find advocates
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
run with it. Yeah.
Yes, I think
Mm.
what I'm trying to say earlier, and when before I lost my trail of thoughts, is we really try to learn each other's language.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, so sometimes it's really just pare it down instead of using the psychodynamic babble. It's really just to pare it down to, we have this Pearlyn, we have this S bar, right? S bar way
Yeah.
of communicating. So we talk in the
Correct. Yes.
situation, background, assessment. What is your recommendation?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So
Mm.
we use that language. Yeah. And
Right.
if needed to back up your assessment and everything, we share the artwork. Yeah, and of course, because we're working in a multidisciplinary team, is already implied consent that we're gonna be sharing each other's information anyway, so patient know already. So that's an advantages. So by me learning their language, they began to learn my language. Yeah.
I think it's just such a mutually enriching experience for, I mean,
Yes.
the way you're talking. I mean, I'm almost feeling envious, because it adds so much value to your own professional development. And I mean, you're taking from and giving off so much, and learning from others. It's just amazing. It really
Mm.
is. It's
And
wonderful to hear
I
this.
think I also to add to that, I also slowly change, and it definitely enriches my experience as a clinician because I began to see other. So I'm not just focusing on psychodynamic. So I began to learn, okay, what are my patient needs, and therefore I think I become more open-minded to learn other modalities. So I learn solution focus,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I learn all sorts of things. Now I'm learning somatic experiencing. It's really just to okay. I don't want to sound corny, but it's really I really really embrace this value of patient is really at the heart of what we do. Yeah.
No, and I also feel that it is also kind of broadens the scope of art therapy rather than having it restricted to this just psychodynamic in nature. Now you see, DBT and art therapy, you see CBT and art therapy. So basically, this is what you guys are also doing. I hope you're documenting all of this and you're writing papers about it or publishing this because this is really invaluable. Honestly, this
We need
kind of
your
work.
help, Huma, because you are the PhD amongst us.
Yes, Huma.
Always here to help.
I'm just having a permanent head damage. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
On that note, guys, we've run over. So we're going to close. Thank you so much for sharing all your slides and talking about your work. And if anyone has any questions, please reach out to us and we'll get in touch with Dian and Pearlyn for you. Like Dian said, we do have copies of the book, Treating eating disorders. So if anyone wants them, please contact us at our email address at contact@atas.org.sg. And yeah, so we would just like to add this snippet before we go. So as part of the SGH Allied Health that Dian is under,
And Pearlyn is under.
And Pearlyn. Yeah, I was getting to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I didn't forget. Okay. So ATAS continues to work towards becoming Allied Health. However, we can't do this because we still lack substantial membership. And the association needs you to join us as a member so that we can have a solid base and a platform to represent our community. So we really want you to come and join us and be part of these conversations, be part of, the discussions that build our community. We have some more exciting talks and workshops planned over the next 3 months. And while the talks are open to everyone on Facebook, the workshops are only open to ATAS members and they're free for ATAS members. So yes, join us and be part of our conversation. Visit the link to sign up or email us. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our guests, Dian and Pearlyn. And thank you, Uma, for being here.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
so
We'll
much.
catch up soon.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.